The world lies in ruins, a desolate, polluted hellscape, at war with no end in sight. But this forever war is known to the people as something different. The forever winter. Not because of snow or ice, but because of the scarcity, the desperation of fighting over what resources remain, and the bleakness of what we all face. A dark, dead future, with no light at the end of it. But who fights this war? Who keeps sending men, machines and bullets at each other? Well, these are the three superpowers of the ruined Earth. Eurasia, Euruska, and Europa. All fight for the limited resources that remain, with each one different in their ways of approaching war. So let's delve deep into these perpetrators of this forever war. First we go to the Far East, to the mighty power of Eurasia, a once megacorporation but now the ruling government of Asia and its surrounding territories. Its previous business mindset runs deep in the organisation, with every investment, be it food, water or shelter, only being given if the benefit is seen. This superpower is rumoured to be the one responsible for starting the Forever War, but who knows? What we do know is sometime in the 21st century, with all Earth's superpowers struggling for resources and choking on the size and needs of their massive populations, war was inevitable, and with Eurasia and Europa at each other's throats, staring down their gun barrels, seeing who would be the first to pull the trigger. Well, rumour has it, Eurasia took the initiative, deciding that a full nuclear strike against Europa would give it the ability to not only topple its rival, but seize what resources they had left and then keep its power sustained. The initial strike of nuclear intercontinental ballistic missiles, or ICBMs for short, were targeted at Europa's major governmental centres, prioritising wiping out its leaders and bureaucratic structure to paralyse Europa's chance to reorganise and strike back once the nuclear fires cleared. Then Eurasia's ground forces could move in to secure the valuable resources and population centres that remained. ICBMs also targeted Europa's tactical satellites to neutralise their communications, and by extension knocking out command and control for surviving Europa military forces. This plan would have been fantastic. That's if Eurasia factored in the response of Europa. It was a major nuclear counterstrike, one that the Eurasian leadership thought they would intercept and destroy. They failed miserably. And in the ensuing nuclear engagement, both superpowers had major cities and huge chunks of their population turned to ash. The world would not be the same place once the sun set on that horrific day, and it would set the stage of an endless war that would go on to this day, 40 long, hard and brutal years later. Another terrible side effect of the ICBM strike against Europa's satellites and their destruction, it led to huge amounts of space debris in orbit around Earth, making launching new satellites or space shuttles safely almost impossible. And with the absence of satellites, long-range communication has become difficult for all sides. After the dust had settled, it was now time for action, and it was Europa who made the push into Eurasian territory. From what we know, the Middle East and Western areas of Asia were the targets, and this became the first major battlefront between Europa and Eurasia, but it wouldn't be the last, with Eurasia and Euruska doing a massive counter-invasion into the western coast of North America, with the megacity of Los Angeles being the first major victim, and now is nothing more than a sprawling ruin where untold millions are buried beneath the steel and stone. Even with the bleakness of the war that rages, life must go on, and Eurasia being a pioneer in bio and agricultural engineering gives them a very unique property above the other superpowers. They can still grow crops, even in the polluted soils that remain after the nuclear war. The fact that their population, well, the wealthy and powerful, can still eat real food is not just a luxury, but also a show of Eurasian power and intellect, and Europa stares across the wasteland in jealousy at this particular fact. Life is tough in Eurasia, with the gap between rich and poor being the largest of any of the superpowers. Those with valuable skills like doctors, engineers, scientists, or powerful industrialists or politicians are lifted to the heights of power and live lives of relative comfort, with their contribution to Eurasia being paramount. Keeping these people relatively happy, healthy and well is important if they are to keep their technological lead above Europa, which is where their strength lies. But for the poor and desperate there is little hope. If you're not working to contribute to Eurasian prosperity, if you're a wandering refugee or even a cripple who can no longer work, well, there are no free lunches here. But there is a chance for you to survive and serve for the good of Eurasia, though it's not something I would recommend. The unproductive will be selected for conscription to serve in the glorious Eurasian military, fighting for the people to provide a better world and better life for all. Also, the regional media department tells its citizens. They forget to mention that you won't be entering the battlefield with the most advanced and elite weapons or equipment. You must prove yourself first by becoming a cyborg. Eurasia is not going to waste resources on the poor and decrepit, barely more than useless eaters, but they do possess something useful. Many organic parts to merge with cybernetic enhancements, and thanks to Eurasia's advanced biotech, well, even the weakest and lowest person can become of use in the war effort. Cyborgs form the bulk of Eurasia's military, with them being extremely numerous, and thanks to the merging of man and machine, make for a very durable and aggressive fighting soldier. But for the poor soul who becomes a cyborg, well, you have lost much of yourself in the process, with your sentience and self-awareness being intact, but stripped of your autonomy. Now with your only purpose being completion of your next objectives, to earn the maintenance that's going to keep you alive. Yes, if you don't have a regular tune-up, you're going to drop dead. And this is seen commonly with the cyborgs that are missing limbs still crawling towards their objectives, desperately fighting to complete it, as they know they have no other option unless they accept their fate. It's brutal and downright diabolical, but it does ensure that every cyborg is aggressive and hyper-motivated to fight Eurasia's enemies. This being combined with the fact that cyborgs are hard to kill makes for the perfect shock troops. And this is best seen when they are literally dropped from the skies in dead drop bombers, and once they smash to the ground, they clamber to their feet and begin their slaughter of the poor Europa troops that meet them on the field. But there is hope for the cyborgs. If they are successful at completing enough missions, well, they may be elevated and able to keep more of their past selves alive. They may even become a cyborg officer and lead their endless half-dead hordes into European territory and one day be truly victorious. But even in death a cyborg can still serve, and here lies the true sickening genius of Eurasia's strategy. As dead and broken cyborg bodies can be collected and recycled by the so-called Mother Courage, an equally majestic yet hair-raising sight on the battlefield, with witnesses saying it's like an angel appearing to rebuild you, though I doubt those being recycled agree. Imagine you've fallen on the battlefield and now you're not only a hulking cyborg monstrosity, but you're stitched and bonded with multiple fallen souls, one man's mind, another's organs and someone else's limbs. Well, Eurasia is conservative with its resources, and this translates to all forms of its activities. Even if this horrific truth of the conscription got out, well, the media department would tell stories of Eurasia's elite soldiers, which is how some of its luckier men wage war. Being integrated with the technology is mandatory for most men, but not all are fully broken like the cyborgs. Many are augmented troops using advanced weapons and armour, though they have a fair amount of themselves mutilated for all the augmentation. These soldiers follow the cyborg hordes into battle. Once the pawns have broken through the initial lines and soaked up the heavier weapons fire, Eurasia's finest close in with a preference for close-range shock warfare, with soldiers like the Brawler and the Assaulter storming into the trenches and bunkers, and with air cover from choppers and insect-like drones that turn the stomach at the very sight of them. This combat style varies greatly from the other superpowers, focusing on infantry over armour and heavy mechanised forces. And in the twisted ruins and trench lines, there is nothing scarier than the roar of a dead drop bomber followed by a cyborg shriek. With all this, Eurasia unleashes its highly aggressive shock warfare. This is paramount, as on the home front, things aren't going as well as they may seem. With Eurasian prosperity compared to the rest of the world, it attracts many people from no man's land, and keeps its population relatively well fed. Well, this leads to population growth, and it's getting to the breaking point. No one expected the war to rage for 40 years, and Eurasia is becoming an overpopulated coffin, dying slowly under its own weight. The leadership cannot put enough resources into cyborg creation to get rid of these excess people. Fortunately, Eurasia's police and domestic security services are on the case, stopping riots and terrorists from disrupting and sabotaging Eurasia, and we're regularly told by the media department that these are Europa sympathisers trying to destroy us from the inside. Hope for Eurasia lies in its alliance with Euruska, and together, in time, they will break the Europans' will. But this has been said for 40 long years, and maybe a new, more dynamic approach may be needed to break the stalemate, but when that will come, who knows? In comparison to Eurasia, its ally, Euruska, is far different. A collective of former Slavic and African nations that banded together for economic and defensive reasons due to the rising powers to its east and west. It eventually culminated in the formation of Euruska. This superpower is considered the weaker of the three, but only in population size and resources, with an absolutely incredible implementation of biological fused AI machines being used at home and on the battlefield. Only a fool would underestimate Euruska, and when the war began, it stood with its ally and answered the call to war. Euruska's lands vary massively, from the cold barren wastes in the Siberian region to the nuclear glass deserts in North Africa, where it is said that the shards of a billion lives were trapped under the gleaming horror of the glass deserts, nicknamed the Mirror Sands. Thanks to its alliance with Eurasia, it has access to extensive technology, which they have not only advanced, but gone beyond what anyone thought possible. This has allowed Euruska to stay competitive, whether it's in a factory, organic recycling plant, or on the battlefield. Its biodrones excel far beyond what humans ever could. The leadership of Euruska is rarely heard from, with the Matrona Committee being the leadership of this superpower, but in reality, it's the Matron Series artificial superintelligence which leads the decisions. Initially, this was intended to manage the battlefield situation tactically and strategically, but slowly has taken control over more aspects of life, with police, domestic security, and all manner of resource management under its AI thumb. With advanced AI handling so much of the work, humans are pushed to the side in many aspects, more tools than people, with many dwelling in sprawling, decrepit bioslums, stacked on top of one another. Space is at a bare minimum, with you barely able to fit your body into a bunk. When it comes to food, the powerful and well-connected are able to get real organic food from allied Eurasia, but most live on processed foods made of, well, whatever the package says. Better to believe that than think of what it really is. And safety is a luxury, with crime and violence being common in such a desolate, futureless place. But this breeds suffering, with the bonus side making Euruskans tough people, fed on a mix of brutality and a will to never give up. An old saying was the Russians would eat grass before they submit. Well, Euruska has inherited this spirit and made it a benchmark of their lives. No matter the hardships, they seem to endure eternal. The bioslums are regularly visited by the District of Recruitment, whose role is to keep the front lines populated with troops whether willing or not, and conscription raids rounding up the poor and powerless are all too common. Euruska needs soldiers like the other superpowers, and people with skills and valuable jobs cannot be wasted on the front lines. Though some will argue conscription may be the better option instead of endless years toiling away in pointless jobs under the watchful eyes of the Department of State Security. And for many souls bundled into lorries with sacks upon their heads, the hope are the stories of lush fields to the east and sunny beaches to the west are true. Maybe if they win enough battles they can swim in the sea and taste real food. I really hope you do, you poor Euruskan conscript, but I live in the real world, and I know what's coming. Endless trenches, piles of bodies, and a stench that would turn a maggot's stomach. The people who conduct these conscription raids belong to the police and security services, and they fall under the banner of the domestic security. Basically soldiers, but instead of shooting Europans, they're here battering their own people on the Matron AI's orders. They're always busy keeping dissent at bay and not only watching for internal threats from the people, but also the bioconstructs, as sometimes they don't always wait until being unleashed on the front lines to start causing chaos, and it erupts inside Euruska, and it falls to the police forces to contain them, and it normally ends with casualties. Still, to be patrolling the bioslums of Euruska is a far better fate than the front lines, where titans and mechs stride through piles of bodies meters high. And extra vigilance must be maintained for Europa's infiltrators and spies trying to sabotage Euruska and cause panic and riots, trying to topple them without breaking through the defence lines. But Euruskans aren't easily dissuaded from their goals, especially not the Matron AI. No compromises are to be had here. And who knows if Eurasia, their supposed allies, might be pulling strings inside Euruska. Your loyalty only goes as deep as it suits the superpowers, and one day your friend may become your foe. When it comes to warfare, Euruska is the most unique in how it conducts its affairs. With its alliance to Eurasia, many of its borders are secure, but this doesn't mean it doesn't duke it out with Europa, with its Eastern European front being bitterly contested, and with the invasion of North America's west coast being a hotspot for Euruskan troopers. Its forces are in a supporting role a lot of the time, defending rear lines, key choke points and supply depots, which are key to Eurasia's success, as a single supply drop missed might be hundreds of troops or cyborgs sent to their graves, or recycled, who knows. But the fighting is still brutal, and Euruskans launch major offensives to support its allies, as their approach to battle is sometimes what is needed to break the stalemate. Euruska's major advantage is the advanced AI bioconstructs. As much majestic as they are demonic, a twisted amalgamation of machine and organic matter, which creates vicious monsters that unleash inhumane destruction upon Euruska's enemies, with the so-called grabbers and stalkers being the most well-known variant of these machine hellspawn, striding and sprinting across the battlefield with blistering speed, shrugging off everything but the most powerful of weapons, with it normally being a good idea to hit them with a tank's main gun to make sure they're put down for good. But if they make it through the streams of fire, then you're in for a screaming, whirling melee where troops are cut down by the dozen, from mechanical limbs or simply being knocked and crushed by the weight of these massive monsters. What makes these bioconstructs even more dangerous is they're animalistic in their nature, not thinking about safety or if their objective is even plausible, stalking trenches for their next victims. It not only brings danger to Europa's troops, but to all who walk the battlefield not under the Eurasian or Euruskan flags. And their senses never slumber. The killing carries on until they fall. The Forever War is a place of hopelessness, but I find these monsters bring it down to an even darker level. Rumours of a new soul-crushing element of the bioconstructs is that they don't simply run off batteries or fuel, instead using more organic sources for energy, and I don't mean a hearty meal. From the accounts I've heard, the bodies of Euruskan soldiers that are either severely wounded or dead are carried by the so-called toothy mechs. These are multi-use biomechanical support constructs doing everything from battlefield maintenance to casualty evacuation. Well, these wounded men are not always getting back to the infirmary, instead being kept as bio-batteries, used to fuel the bioconstructs until they breathe their last breath. But the horror goes further, with the toothy mechs carrying out medical procedures to extend these human batteries' lives and injecting them with all sorts of compounds to make them more agreeable to their torture. Their last breath not being in a bed or even the end of a bayonet, but being drained of all their life's energies so a soulless mechanical machine can take a few more steps for what good that will truly do. If the bioconstructs don't break your will, well, Euruska has the big lads to send your way. Massive mechanised suits piloted by actual people. A shock, I know, but a nice one. These are the big hitters, facing off against tanks and defence turrets pretty much walking artillery pieces, wielding huge railguns that look like massive AKs, which brings a smile to many an old Kalashnikov enjoyer. These weapons smash the European lines and send their tanks into a reversing panic. But they lack much in terms of anti-infantry weapons. That's where the organ mechs come in. These close combat shock troopers storm forward into the trenches, flushing out fortified positions and sending the troops into the open. They're not seen unless a major assault is happening, with each one being a well-trained elite soldier, usually deployed in pairs. These big lads open up the way for Euruska's infantry, who have to brave the dangers with far less protection. Euruskan infantry forces lack the numbers of other superpowers, but on average they're better armed, favouring small strong units that can take a beating, while the heavier forces hit hard. This approach favours its supporting role on the strategic level, but make no mistake, the Euruskans can still kill all the same with their trusty AKs. This reliability is worth its weight in food on these dirty battlefields, and specialist troops such as snipers or the sneaky and quick raiders exploit any gaps in the enemy's defences. But where would the troops be without their beloved tanks? Well, the T-90 blasts and shreds fortifications. This tank has stood the test of time and is fielded in large numbers. No matter what people say, tanks always seem to become useful no matter what weapons are deployed against them. Much of Euruska's air support comes from Eurasia, with their insect-like drones always supporting the ground forces. Maybe with its more defensive and supporting role, its own air forces are drafted to the frontline duties, but I'm sure we'll see more bioconstructs hit the ground and skies before this war comes to an end. Because for it to end, one of the superpowers would have to fall, and Europa still seems to have a lot of fight left in it. But how, after 40 years, against two superpowers could they? Well, it's a question that many seem to ask, but no one seems to be able to answer. But I may be able to shed a little light on the situation. Europa, or the Federation of Europa as it's officially called, claims that it's a voluntary unification of Western nations in North and South America, and also Europe. But in reality it was the stronger Western nations absorbing the weaker ones, through a mix of soft and then very hard and brutal power. Civil unrest, riots and political upheaval followed. But Europa had perfected its oppression of the people, and quickly it turned these uprisings into piles of bodies, and propaganda to benefit their rule. As you can imagine, life wasn't all sunshine after such incidents, with its megacities mired in crime and disease, requiring draconian measures to keep its citizens in order. But then, on the fateful day the nukes started flying, and the Forever War began, life was to get even worse for all those in the West. As the ash settled and the people looked upon the new broken world, it was quickly realised that Europa's leadership was missing. But the power gap was quickly filled with the security services turning Europa into a surveillance state, one that even Big Brother would envy. With every action monitored, the illusion of freedom is maintained with people going to work and living their lives, but one misstep or bad word and the full weight of the state will fall upon you. With the police forces being heavily militarised and due process and civil rights being no more than a bad joke, good luck if you do something wrong. Life is mired with poverty and only the most powerful live comfortably. But all rich or poor have to eat the same protein-synthesised food, as the lands are too polluted and wretched to grow crops. And where this protein comes from is better not spoken aloud. And the dense megacities are violent, and even with the constant crackdowns and policing, crime still hits all walks of lives. The situation is bad, and the people know it, and many dream of an alternative to their lives. Well, there is a chance, but it's rather risky. This chance is to enlist in the righteous Europa military, or so they claim themselves to be, with Europa's forces having the highest amount of volunteers of all three superpowers, though conscription is still used to keep the numbers up to optimal fighting levels. And those who serve say the front is hell, but at least you have a choice in what happens that day instead of being under the state's watchful eye. Though I'd argue your choice is death by a cyborg or bioconstruct, so not ideal. Europa's approach to warfare is far more conventional than its rivals, with it being the technological dunce of the three. But where it lacks innovation, it makes up for in good old-fashioned quantity over quality, using massed infantry and armoured formations to batter its way to victory. But who commands these men? Well, Stratcom takes that role, a military-minded AI that decides objectives and the resources provided to complete them, with completion of the missions being rewarded with bullets, bandages and food. That's if the supplies reach you on the logistical nightmare that is the front line. One major criticism of Stratcom by the troops is that the missions and objectives being given out on many occasions are impossible, such as sending 10 men against a fortified Eurasian line of hundreds. These suicide missions could be ignored, but then no supplies will reach you and eventually you have a choice. Death by starvation and dehydration, or by charging the enemy lines. It's smart of Europa's leadership giving the choice of the missions to AI, as it takes away the blame when something goes wrong. Better for them to blame the AI and say, well, it's based off facts and figures, and if you failed, it's not because you didn't have enough resources, it's because you didn't fight hard enough. A smart choice as always, you blame the troops, not the commanders. That's just how it goes. The forces of Europa have been fighting a defensive war for decades after their initial invasion of Asia and the counter-invasion of North America. Europa quickly realised it would be a war of attrition, one that it would have to throw bodies at to win. Even though people dying in droves is a bad thing, it does mean less food is needed overall, which at least helps ease one resource worry. With Eurasia and Euruska being the ones to strike out, Europa has become masters of building massive fortified lines, mazes of trenches and reinforced bunkers, bristling with automated defence turrets that have the firepower to shred even the cyborg hordes. As the enemies close in, they're met with minefields, walls of razor wire and destroyed vehicles and splintered shells of titans. It makes for an almost untraversable battlefield that forces all into the claustrophobic yet somehow canyon-like trenches that plunge deep into the earth. Pipes and wires jump from every angle, and here infantry and biomonstrosities fight face to face, with guns, claws, blades and even teeth tearing and ripping until all that remains is a bloody stew that leaks into the drainage ditches. Yet this horror doesn't deter the attacks. They come day after day, to test the strength of Europa's defences, and maybe one day that strength will waver, but not today. If the lines are breached, then Europa's infantry takes the stage. They come in many types, with the basic troops being the lightest forces seen on the front, but what they lack in staying power they make up for in firepower, being essentially glass hammers throwing a good punch but not taking one well. But there's a lot of them and the trenches are packed to the brim with endless waves of Scar rifle armed warriors blasting away at their foes. But the Europa troops get the rough end of the stick on all the infantry in the Forever War, as they have to face off against the horrendous cyborgs and bioconstructs unleashed by Eurasia and Euruska. The minds of these men will either break or become fortresses under such pressure, and then the specialists lend their arms, with snipers hitting the enemy's elites and killing the officers to sow chaos, and troops such as the EODs facing off against the heavy mechanised foreigners. And if luck is on their side, a legend of the front lines may rear their head to kill the enemy by the dozen. One such man is the so-called Pyro, wearing an astronaut suit with a tattered American flag wrapped around the helmet. This veteran blasts high explosive and incendiary grenades at Europa's foes. He scares his enemies and causes cheers among his peers. No one seems to know where he hails from, but the European state news praises him as a hero of the state doing his righteous and just duty of Europa with every man, machine and biomonster he slays. It must be noted that Europa has done an amazing job in terms of propaganda and forcing media down its citizens and soldiers' throats, with faith that Europa is a bastion of freedom and ideals facing against foreign invaders who are soulless and wish only death and destruction. Who knows, maybe they're right, but my feeling is all three superpowers are the same gigantic decaying husks, lumbering on as they had no other choice, and in the end, when the guns go quiet, and they look at each other straight in the eyes, what stares back is simply a reflection of themselves. Europa can't match its rivals in advanced tech or biomonstrosities, but thanks to large stockpiles of weapons and munitions, and the never-ending production from its armament factories, reliable and sturdy weapons and war machines reach the front lines. A staple of this is the Merkava tank. It's a multi-role machine that can back up the troops as a tank, a troop carrier, and be converted for all manner of roles. It brings strong armour, a powerful gun, and good mobility to boot. And reports from the east talk of some of these being strewn with the bodies of enemy troops or civilians to cause shock and psychological warfare effects on them. But I doubt the bioconstructs and drones really care for such atrocities. Not only tanks cross the ruined hellscape of the front lines, the European hulks also. This is the nickname given to the many mechs and exosuits that go toe-to-toe with the newer, flashier enemies, but their heavy armour and firepower make them a match for any machine, and these older mechs are fitted with weapons for every occasion, with super heavy rifles for armour, backed up by miniguns to shred infantry. They're often flanked by smaller exosuits where elite European soldiers dance around their foes pumping machine gun and autocannon fire into their ranks. And Eurasia and Europa may poo-poo this older tech, but at the end of the day they still often lose to their older but proven designs. In the air, Europa sends swarms of light recon drones to scout and help with communications. These may be primitive compared to the insect-like drones from the east, but with their sheer numbers they're able to overwhelm forces in the skies and on the ground. With light machine gun fire, they shred whatever they spot, and when combined with Europa's waves of men and machines, it's an effective combined arms strategy. And if it fails, the rows of fortification and turrets will hold back the invaders. The Forever War is truly the greatest attrition war the world has ever seen, and Europa seems to be at ease with the casualties, knowing it's going to end only one way: last man standing, or machine, or bioconstruct. Whichever is left, the world they inherit is not worth the bloodshed and pain. But who am I to question the three superpowers? I'm but a simple scavenger. As long as I have water in my glass, and what I call food on my plate, then I need not worry about the world around me. Well, not until the next scavenger run. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this, guys. It's been a pleasure to bring to you, and as always, have a beautiful evening.